So our final speaker this evening is a multidisciplinary designer, an art director based in Montreal. His design practice has an international reputation, and previously he was a partner at Nothing in Common, a creative technology studio in Brooklyn. He is currently an adjunct professor at the School of Visual Arts and the director of design at SSENSE. Please welcome to the stage our last speaker of the night, Eric Hu.
Yo, what's up? First off, I just want to thank Alex and the rest of the team at Dynamic for inviting me here. I'm really happy to be here. They got the cool mics with the wires and all the metal. Like, they've made me more machine than man at this point, and I look kind of like a Boston Dynamics like animal, but let's do this. So, look, I'm not gonna stand here and like slowly go through my portfolio, even though it would like really stroke my ego. But it's mainly because like you could find most of my stuff online, and like it's probably good that I show you like the rare B-sides, and like frankly, I'll pay to be here. So but at the same time, I mean, I know I gotta do what I have to do. So let's just try to breeze through this real quick because I'm here to talk about some specific things. Okay, so my name is Eric. I make pretty stuff for pretty cool people. I'm a designer. I'm a programmer. I work with cool. I work in like music and fashion, and like build brands and like products. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so. Last year, I made the transition from a lifetime of working in agencies to like an in-house position at SSENSE right here in Montreal. And it doesn't seem like a big change, but it meant like a complete rethinking on the way I work and think about branding. And so, I packed my bags up in New York City, and I moved out here to Montreal, and I love Montreal, and it's great, and Montreal is super sick. Okay, Montreal's like super sick like 4 months out of the year. The rest of the time, all right, so the title of my talk is Branding Out of Order, or alternatively, it's 2016 was truly the year of realizing things. Now, back to SSENSE. So I work at SSENSE now, where I lead their in-house design team. So, okay, did everyone know that was how it was pronounced? Like essence? Yeah. I shopped there all the time. I was a big fan. I didn't realize it was called Essence until like a week before my job interview. But yes, it is called Essence, or if you're French, it's Sanson. I'm just kidding. No, it's just Essence. But anyways, this was the biggest responsibility I found myself in. I just turned 27 at the time, and like when I was like an independent designer with a small studio, I intentionally worked with smaller clients. And the times I did work on larger scale clients, I was like freelancing at agencies, and I had the benefit of hiding behind like the agency's name. But here I was about to inherit essentially the design direction of like a 9-figure global e-commerce retailer, and it employs like a couple hundred people. So in addition to like their e-commerce business, they're really getting serious about editorial stuff. And like they just tapped the editor of 032C magazine to lead the editorial initiative. And it's one of my favorite magazines, so I was like, holy crap, this is like a crazy opportunity. And they were also like opening like a flagship retail store. So it was like e-commerce, like packaging, like store design, like editorial, every deliverable imaginable, right? And it was like, okay, like don't screw this up. And so there was never an in-house design team before I was going to join there. So I was responsible for actually assembling the team. So when I started, there were 2 full-time designers there. A year later, we're 10 people, and 10 amazing people. I lead, I can't stress this enough. I lead an amazing team of graphic designers, UX designers, art directors, project managers. And everything I'm about to show you after this wouldn't be possible if I didn't have such an amazing team. And for the sake of time, I'm going to have to heavily oversimplify our working process, and it might not do them all justice, but they're all here, and I hope they know I love them all. So It seems like the team has grown a lot over a short period of time, but the whole company was like sort of growing at an accelerated rate. And so actually I was like really careful about managing the growth of that team. So again, like I didn't want to mess this up. I was young and hadn't been in this situation before, and I needed to make this right. So I reached out to Hannah Donovan, who was a mentor of mine, for help. And she gave me this book by Michael Watton called The First 90 Days. I think some of you might have heard it. But there's a lot of ideas in this book, but basically how you handle the first 3 months of your job can determine the rest of your time there. I know, scary. But the impressions you make, the precedents you set, the habits you form, all carry into the rest of your tenure. And Michael says, don't do anything major in the first 90 days. Listen more than trying to do. Observe the company, meet with everyone, listen to their thoughts and needs, formulate a game plan and like really take that time. And this is all new to me because I come from a world where you had to like turn things around like really, really fast. And, like I haven't been out of school for that long, so I still have like that kind of like spunky kind of energy when, I have like a new client, like the discovery phase is like really short and I just like start swinging. But I really took this to heart, and it's kind of hard to convince like a client sometimes, like, yo, I'm not gonna work for the first 3 months, is that cool? But I reported directly to the CEO and explained what would happen, and so with his blessing, he let me give it a shot. And it ended up being the best thing that could happen to me. And so the extra time allowed me to really consider how I wanted to go about this. The author of this book also mentions that when you start working with a company, they're usually 1 out of like 5 transition stages. They may be starting out and have a fresh slate. And that's like, free game for you to just like have a blank slate and to, do your thing. They may be in trouble and need you to help turn things around. They may be trying to accelerate their growth and to deal with that sort of rapid expansion, etc. But what it made me realize was that different transition strategies call for different design approaches. And I bring that up because, like designers like love transforming like companies. When an agency is asked to rebrand a company, I think the good ones will try to dig deeper and ask the client like why, but I don't think we challenge enough. And the truth is that the public is often less receptive of that sort of change, And rebrands have sort of become spectacles. A company makes a new logo, people get mad, it's on the news, there's discussions, hot takes on Twitter, like Instagram memes, and designers, who didn't work on this start taking a stab at it themselves, like uploading to their own Behance profile page. It's so lame and so dumb, like whatever, like the logo is only one part of a rebrand, but it's like such an easy target, like everyone's always just mad at this. But I think like rather than just trying to dismiss it, outright, I think it speaks to something like really important. And it's that audiences these days are more visually literate and skeptical than ever. These things feel like, when your brand does like a complete 180, it kind of feels like it's trying to ditch an old audience in order to gain a new one. And that audience might be like really loyal and like have gained you probably like gained their trust like over like a long period of time. And so you can't really take it lightly, and they could tell when you're faking it, essentially. And the way I see it is that as a brand, you're an undercover cop until proven otherwise. I call this the rule of narc. But I don't want to throw shade, but like let's take a look at Kaleidoscope magazine. On the left is an old issue from a few years ago designed by OKRM. And one day they redesigned completely, and it was led by Bureau Merkel-Busch. Now, don't get me wrong. Especially, for those tuning in on a live stream. Oh, God. They're 2 of my favorite studios. I love both studios together. And I actually think the fault lies more with the client than anything. But how do you go from this to like that without any change in like the core business or the attitude, It just comes across like they're desperate to try something new for whatever reason, as if they needed a turnaround. And there weren't really any changes to the editorial direction itself, and the content of the editorial staff were the same. So it just makes kind of design feel superficial. And then you got like another thing where, there's new changes in management and they want to like broadcast their news. Doing 180 doesn't necessarily like inspire confidence in your audience, It's like maybe your audience didn't realize something was wrong and now you pointed it out and now everybody can't stop thinking about it. So it's like, okay, so check this out. So Bloomberg this week just went through a redesign, right? And these are both cover stories of Tim Cook, 3 years apart from each other. And they went from, these interesting like exposés that no other magazine could do. And then they relaunched and they started blasting like the news and saying like, oh, we're getting real serious now. We want, our covers and our imagery to reflect the seriousness of the content and the times that we're living in. And then, they have photos like these. And I mean, like, what are you supposed to say to this? Like, cool, dude. Like, I mean, like, what's the point? What's the point of even bringing that up? Like, I don't know. But yeah, you want to be super serious? Okay, that's cool. Anyway, sorry. Okay, long tangent. What it made me realize that the more your design deviated, the higher the likelihood of it being interpreted that it was meant to fix something. And if your audience interprets that you were trying to fix something, and kind of just draws the conclusion that something was broken. And when it came down to examine how I approached this, at Essence, rebranding the company that is, there wasn't really much to fix. The company was doing great. It was expanding really quickly. It gained a loyal audience. Like, the editorial content was getting, exponentially better. Immediately in conversations I had with all the stakeholders in the company, I kind of just stopped referring to what I was doing as a rebrand and just trying to call it something else, like a brand transition. But to go beyond just like changing like the buzzword, I wanted to go forward with these with a set of principles that when I was encountering what needed to be designed, that I was filling gaps instead of redoing things. That everything I did had, first and foremost had to address an immediate need before, I, redo what was already there. And so I think one of the biggest things that could have helped was that at the time there wasn't a design system and there were strict templates. And it's like kind of like the worst of both worlds because you don't know what to do when you encounter a new situation and you can't really change. And so Essence editorial articles kind of just were stuck in this template purgatory for a few years. And it wasn't like it was bad typography, it was like there's no typography, And it's like design-wise, it didn't seem like much was happening. At the same time, it didn't really reflect the content side. A lot of things were happening in the art direction and content side. So, go back to 2014, and I pulled an image from one of our editorial articles. It features a model in a snowy winter wonderland, not dressed appropriately at all for the weather. But the gist of it is, it's a made-up scene, right? This would not happen in real life. And the idea was that luxury, the way it was treated, was this thing you construct and this fantasy that you try to sell. And it kind of trickled through just most of the editorials that we were producing. And it's not bad, but it's different than what it is now, where yes, you do have these high production scenes of this model's in Iceland for a Fear of God shoot, but you also, it's juxtaposed with this is a biker subculture in Berlin. Next to these high production shoots, we have these more kind of documentary photos that it wasn't trying to construct a world, it was trying to encounter the world as is. And there's a shift from this world building to documenting the world in this way that it's this idea that lifestyle isn't really bought or constructed. It's a state of mind and it's obtained through everyday life. And these times kind of change. And amidst even all of this stuff, we even have video editorials that were shot on an iPhone camera because the concept was appropriate. And so, when you think about the system, how could the typography reflect that shift in our tone of voice? And so we assembled these two typefaces together, FAVORIT and Times Now. And at the surface level, they both look like pretty everyday quotidian sort of typefaces. But there's a couple of nice details. The S, for example, is slightly tilted. The 8 is upside down. The R has a straight leg, and the 6 is doing the stanky leg. And so, and the S was particularly interesting because the word essence has 3 S's. And so we worked with the creators of that typeface, Dynamo, the Swiss foundry based in Basel and Berlin. And we made a couple of modifications of the characters, and we basically got our own custom cut of the typeface. And so that was one part of it. And the second typeface we wanted to use was this typeface called Times Now. And it's based off of Times New Roman. It's the most common everyday typeface in the world. It's on every single computer on Earth. But there's one key difference, and it's thinned out. And because it's thinned out, you know, it adopts a much more sort of elegant kind of feel. And I was really attracted to the idea of like getting everyday raw materials and making one gesture to change the entire attitude. And the two typefaces together form this like really kind of flexible system where you can kind of adopt different voices and different attitudes depending on the situation. Whether you want it to be quiet or elegant or gentle, or if you want it to go a little bit crazier. And so once we nailed down the typefaces, we wanted to continue working at a small scale instead of like zooming out. A lot of branding takes place in a top-down notion. You start with a strategy, then you get the attitude, the tone of voice, and then you have the logo, and then you go through the applications and all the individual touch points. But the team wanted to go on a different route. We wanted to do this from the bottom up because at the end of the day, it's the small things that people interact with that have like the most impact. And so for the editorial portion of the Essence ecosystem, it meant the paragraph of the body of an article. And this is what people would be reading, and this is what their eyes would be on the entire time. And so we wanted to focus on that. It doesn't look like much, but we spent the longest time on getting this paragraph to look right. Ultimately, the proper reading experience on the web affected the brand just as much as anything else. We knew that if we got this right, it would trickle up. The right spacing, the right size, the right amount of distance between each line, the right color. It's not black, it's a very dark gray. And it might not matter to you, but stuff like that matters to us, and you're gonna see how it all makes sense in the end. And so with the paragraph, came things like italicizing text, determining what a link looks like or an abbreviation. And once we figured that out, we came up with a list of every type size that we anticipated that we would use on the entire site. All of them in relationship to the size of the typical paragraph of text. So it goes from small to large. An extra large headline, you got a medium subheadline, a serif, a sans serif, it's all indexed, right? And it's in Latin and Japanese. And then we figured out every single color that we would use, from the color of buttons to error messages. We cataloged every single icon, and with the help of us two, a studio based in New York, our development partner, we created this extensive index of every possible element that we would use. And this was long before we used a single mockup. And it's more of an accurate reflection of how the web works. Because the web isn't no longer about like these static pages. And so mocking up static pages didn't make sense to us, right? The web nowadays is made up of small, individualized, reusable bits of data that we shuffled around and rearranged depending on the context. And we had to treat this like Legos and build things independently of each other. So a headline, a subheadline, and credit text are all individual components, but they come together to create, for example, a masthead. And so you combine one component, like a 50% with extra large head, with a 50% medium subheadline, and you get this masthead. And you combine a masthead with an image that's flush right, then you get the opening of an article. And in the back end, the editors, this is exactly what they see. So it's just a bunch of pressing buttons here and there to generate hundreds of different combinations, right? But because we designed each component individually, we didn't have to test each combination out. We knew they were going to work together and be good on principle. And so another example is like a large headline, but a medium 75% serif subheadline offset 25. And this is like a string of spaghetti words, but I think it's still legible to a human being. So you fill that in with content, and then you get, again, the opening of a headline, and then you change the size of the headline, you change the size of the subheadline, you offset something, it creates all these different layout combinations. And so you put that all together, and you have, like an intro text module, an image, and an interview, and it starts forming, a full-on like editorial experience within like minutes. And you combine that with, a series of like custom-built feature microsites, it results in an incredibly rich like editorial experience. And the homepage actually works in the same way, using all these individual components to generate almost like the feeling of a newspaper. Rather than like these individual thumbnails, you're looking at like compositions as a whole, as images and like type interacts with each other. And so we're pretty proud of like the work we were doing, but then like I said, it still doesn't address like that overnight reveal, thing that I mentioned. And we didn't want to end up like this or being perceived at that. But it was going to work out because the thing about Essence is that it publishes an article every day. That was really fertile ground for us to test out new ideas and to really keep things changing almost so much that they don't almost register at all. And so if you logged on to essence.com in the past 9 months, you know that this is not what a typical article looks like anymore. Since last fall, the design team has been pushing the limits of the current brand, going from this to this to this, all with the old typeface and the old, set of rules, and each day allowed sort of this new opportunity. But as we started working over the months, some experiences crazier than others, we slowly and ever so slowly start to resemble the new brand. And so we're just slowly, like a gradient, just like ramping up towards it. And so this is like the John Raffman article I saw, and this is what the article looks like with the old brand. And if you use it with the new brand, it's not that different. And so in the next few months, a lot of this stuff will start officially rolling out. Not at once, but like one thing at a time. Giving, our audience time to contemplate and like acclimate over this period. And so this is going to be the new logo. It's kind of funny because this was actually the last thing we finalized in the process rather than the first. But by the time we got here, everyone had an idea of what it was going to look like. Essence typeset in our own custom typeface, looking ordinary until you look closer. You see the S's tilt. It's kind of like a wink, right? If you catch it, good for you. If you don't, it's still accessible. And in the next few days, this is a picture of our lobby at work. In the next few days, some sign people are going to come in and swap the sign out. And it's going to look like this. And after everything I've showed, it's clear that a lot has happened. But if you work at Essence and you're not paying attention, you may not even notice a change. But again, maybe that's the point. And so I'll leave you with that, and thank you so much.